Good morning. Welcome to Kingsport News Hour. Today is let's see now. I think it's the eighth day. Yes, it's the eighth day of the eighth month in the 16th year of Chunki. And this is Tim Elder sitting in for the second king, Chenrezuk, Young Jin Moon. And let's take our tour around the kingdom right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, 59 degrees and clear. 81 for a high today, areas of fog this morning, otherwise partly cloudy. 62 for a low tonight, mostly cloudy with a couple of showers. And then in father's hometown, Cheongju, North Pyongan province in Korea, what is today North Korea, 65 and clear right now. Partly cloudy and 55 for a low tonight. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy, morning shower in spots, followed by periods of rain and thunderstorm in the afternoon, a high of 77. And then at the Cheongguk Palace in northeast Pennsylvania, it is 51 degrees right now with fog, less humid with sun through high clouds today, though, so 77. So I guess that humidity is going to go down. The fog's going to disappear. Partly cloudy tonight, low of 50 degrees. And then at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground, currently clear at 59. Thickening clouds today with a high of only 88. It's not going to get to 90 today, they say. Mostly cloudy and low of 66 tonight. At the Suncheon Palace in Korea, 67 mostly clear. Tonight, 60 degrees for a low under partly cloudy skies. Tomorrow, intervals of clouds and sunshine, high of 80. At the Gumna Palaces in Japan, 77 and mostly cloudy. Clear to partly cloudy tonight, 61 for a low. Tomorrow, variable cloudiness with a passing shower in the afternoon, high of 78. And then in Ilan, yes, still hanging on to the 90-degree mark. It was up to 95 degrees today. Let's see what's going to happen tomorrow. Okay, yeah, still holding on to 90, that 9 handle. Right now, 82 and clear, getting down to 74 tonight, mostly clear tomorrow, mostly sunny and hot, high of 93. So yes, Taiwan is holding on to its fame as the hot place, and it is. It's interesting because we are just above the Tropic of which one is it? I never did get that in class in school, whether it's the which one is the Capricorn and which one is the what's the other one? Cancer, right? Okay. And so let's look it up right now. I'm going to change the language. Tropic of Capricorn is the one that is south. Okay, so this is we're near the Tropic of Cancer. We're the northern north, which of course is, the Earth tilts 23 and a half degrees on the axis of the sun. And so, uh, you know, at the um, one time of year when the sun is directly above the equator. And then there's one time a year when it's directly above the Tropic of Cancer, and one time of year when it's directly above the Tropic of Capricorn. And anyway, we're near the Tropic of Cancer because we're at about 26 degrees, I think. So the Tropic of Capricorn is 23 and a half degrees. So this is, and we just passed, right? We just a week or so ago, we passed the autumnal equinox. Is it the equinox? Yes, the equinox. And so when you're in the shade, it's not so bad. But when you get out into the sun, it's like you're standing under a heat light, a heat lamp in the bathroom. Sometimes they have these heat lamps. That's what it feels like. So the temperature may be 93 or 95 or whatever. You may say, well, it gets up to that all the time here, but it's different. It's different. You get that direct sunlight, and the feeling is very different. It's like you're standing under a heat lamp. Okay. All right. So that is where we are right now. And let's go to Father's Word. Okay. I was out and about in Taipei today. Very interesting. Maybe I can speak a little bit about that experience. Okay. And meanwhile, we are in the book on, human life and the world of the spirit. Uh, okay, this is Father October 2nd, 1990. That's what happens when you go to Spirit World. Obviously, this is an excerpt from a longer speech. The larger the bosom of love is, the more people are lined up to try and get into that bosom, to try and go into that bosom. That person is the person who will be respected in that world. That person, or that person may be surrounded by 1,000 people or 10,000 people who are saying, "Oh, I want to live with this person," and then that person who is being who they're talking about then um, will have that much more real estate or territory and be that much more wealthy. So if you pass by someone's home and you don't hear anything, don't hear anything, that won't do. If you don't hear anything, that's not good. In fact, 많이 심어준 사람이 전화의 인격 기준이 되고 the standard of a character in the spirit world, in that world, or in the spirit world, life after death, will be the person who will not be able to pass by such a home without saying anything. They want to plant their love in that home. Okay, that's it for today. Praise God for the word that He has given us today. Yes. So yes, it's all a matter of course, of love and learning to give love, or creating the capacity for love, capacity to give love and to receive love as well. There's always a trap. There's a trap. A trap is that a person can become arrogant. Oh, I'm such a loving person. That's Satan's trap, isn't it? Got to be careful. Okay. Always remain humble. The loving person is a very humble person because they know how much more love they have to give and they wish that they could give more. All right. All right, let's see. I can talk a little bit about going into, it's not a big deal, but I decided to take some time out today and just hop on a train and go into Taipei. And as I mentioned before, there's a mountain range, right, between here and Taipei, because we're on the northeast coast, and Taipei, of course, is on the northwest coast. And there was a time apparently when it would take 5 to 7 hours to get to Taipei from here, because this was by driving. You had to go along the coastal road. And now they've dug a tunnel through the mountains, so it's much. They're just a fraction of the time that it used to take. Anyway, I took a train there and took a bus back. The bus was, I think, faster and cheaper. So maybe from now on I'll be taking the bus, I guess. But the problem with the bus though is that I noticed that although the traffic was smooth in coming in this direction, it was in the afternoon. Going the other direction, going toward Taipei in the afternoon, it was quite crowded, quite congested. So you gotta choose. You got to choose your way of getting around, because there's only that one tunnel and just 2 lanes each way through that tunnel. So if that gets congested, then there's not much you can do about it unless you're going to go all the way around on the coastal road. Now the nice thing about the train was that it did follow the coast. for the most part, for a large part. And I had some beautiful views of the Pacific Ocean, um, beautiful view of Turtle Island, and I have no idea why it's called Turtle Island, but that's what it's called. It didn't look like a turtle to me. Maybe there are a lot of turtles there. I don't know. Anyway, praise God for the experience that He gave me today. So I'm back. I'm back here at my desk in Luodong Township in Yilan County. All right, let's go to this story. This is well, interesting story. Let's think about it. Let's think about this. So Xi Jinping and President Trump are going to meet in Korea at the side on the side of the APEC meeting end of next month, end of October, and beginning of November. And so they're preparing for this, and Xi Jinping is saying, you know what? I think I'm going to ask Trump. I think I'm going to convince Trump to oppose the independence of Taiwan in return for agreeing to Trump's trade policy. Now, this quite frankly is a pretty astute move if you're looking at it from Xi Jinping's point of view. I'm sure Taiwan is not going to be happy about this, but let's take a look here. And let's think about this in terms of the Cain-Abel relationship between China and Taiwan that I mentioned a few days ago. When was that? I think it was last Friday, I believe. Chinese leader Xi Jinping is preparing to use upcoming high-level meetings with President Trump to push for a major shift in U.S. policy, a formal statement opposing Taiwan's independence. For Xi, this would go far beyond the Biden-era phrasing that Washington does not support independence. Instead, it would align the U.S. more closely with Beijing's position and weaken Taiwan's international standing, the Wall Street Journal reported. While the distinction between not supporting and opposing Taiwan independence may appear semantic, it carries weight in geopolitics. For Xi, such wording would mark a U.S. move from neutrality to actively siding with Beijing, a symbolic but powerful victory that could help consolidate his domestic authority. Analysts argue that achieving this shift would be a holy grail for Beijing, undercutting Taipei's confidence in U.S. backing. Trump, unlike his predecessor, has avoided firm commitments on whether the U.S. would defend Taiwan militarily. He has said doing so would weaken his negotiating position. Instead, he has highlighted a personal assurance from Xi that China would not invade Taiwan during his presidency, while calling Beijing patient. This ambiguity has raised questions about whether Washington is prioritizing a trade deal over its long-held security commitments. But I would say, though, that unlike his predecessor, but the predecessors before Biden, though, also had this strategic ambiguity, is my understanding. That's why they put the predecessor here in the singular, not the plural. Recent moves by the Trump administration have fueled unease in Taipei. The U.S. delayed military aid and denied Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te a transit stop on American soil, prompting him to cancel a trip to Latin America. Officials said the decision was designed to avoid influencing Taiwan's domestic politics, but critics see it as evidence of Washington's soft peddling support for Taipei to appease Beijing. Chinese diplomats and policy advisors are pressing their U.S. counterparts to adopt language opposing Taiwanese independence, framing it as a necessary step for stability. And of course, stability means the absolute power of the Chinese Communist Party. That's where we get stability, right? Just like in the times of Rome, power of Rome brought stability. And so Xi Jinping wants that kind of situation for the CCP. Experts say Xi views Trump's desire for a sweeping trade deal and his transactional approach to diplomacy as the best opening in years to advance Beijing's Taiwan agenda. Even if progress is incremental, Beijing believes persistent pressure could gradually erode Taiwan's trust in Washington. And then that would then make Taiwan more apt to accept CCP's governance, right? And this has been the CCP's policy. Plan A is not to invade Taiwan militarily. Plan A is to convince the people of Taiwan, or a majority of the people of Taiwan, that they're better off accepting the CCP as their overlord. And if the connection with Washington weakens, then that's more likely to happen, I would say. Wouldn't you? That seems pretty obvious, right? If the people in Taiwan are beginning to feel sort of isolated and say, oh, well, even America now is no longer on our side, we might as well go with Beijing. Otherwise, they'll invade us. So let's just go ahead and open the gates and bring the Trojan horse in, and everything will be all right. The coming months will test whether Trump can balance his pursuit of an economic bargain with the need to maintain deterrence in the Taiwan Strait. U.S. officials insist their one China policy remains unchanged, but Beijing's strategy is to keep pushing until Washington's language tilts further its way. For Xi, a formal American rejection of Taiwanese independence would represent not only a diplomatic coup, but a step closer to his long-term goal of reunification. Right. Interesting. This is an interesting chess move by Xi Jinping. And we'll have to see how Trump intends to counter it. I don't think we have a comment from the White House yet. This is something that they need to think about before commenting on. I think perhaps something will come out in the State Department briefing or the White House briefing later on today. Okay, because this came out basically at a early Washington time. People are still eating their breakfast, or at least on the highway on their way to work still. So that's why I think we don't have any kind of a comment yet from Washington on this. Be interesting to see what they say. But I think the United States, though, now that I've read it, I'm thinking more strongly the U.S. needs to be firmly behind Taiwan, and that they're not going to sell out Taiwan for the sake of a trade deal. I hope. So we pray. Let's pray for that. Okay. All right. Very interesting story there. Gonna have to follow that up for a while. That's for sure. Let's see. I do have an update on Hak Ja-han today. She attended a second sort of interrogation today, and I don't have any content from that. But the situation, or the scandal, shall we say, or whatever you call it, is expanding. It's no longer just a purse, or a handbag. It's no longer even $70,000. Now, actually, it's a $7.2 million, according to the media. And other stuff is coming out too, but I hesitate because these reports are based on most of them are based on anonymous sources, and with libel laws being as they are in Korea, anonymous source reporting is still pretty authoritative. In other words, reporters really have to be careful about using anonymous sources to say something that turns out not to be true. But we'll see. And it's all going to come out in the trial anyway, so there's no sense in talking about speculation right now. But there is a $7.2 million figure, according to today's exchange rate anyway, $7.2 million. And also late breaking is that apparently this story is broken in Japan, but I have not seen it here, that it's not just the Conservative Party, that there's also someone in the government party, someone they say high up in the government party that's also being connected to the Family Federation, and that'll be interesting if that comes out here. Uh, that should come out perhaps in a little while. So anyway, the thing is continuing, and it continues to snowball, and we'll see. Meanwhile, Hak Jahan's lawyers are apparently planning or considering asking the court to take a look at her detention, to uh, take a look at it again and see whether it's really necessary. And that there will, if they decide to do that, there will be a hearing, and then the court will have to make a decision. Um, of course, we know what they're going to say. They're going to say, well, she's 83 years old, she's sick, she has a heart condition, da 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 da. We also know what the prosecution is going to say. They're going to say, yeah, but investigation is continuing, and we need access to her, not on her terms, but on our terms. She can't just come wandering in anytime she pleases, right? We have to have access to her when we want access to her, like we did today. Today we needed access to her, so we got her, and there was no problem. But if we release her, then who knows what will happen? She's already in the past blown off 3 subpoenas, and who knows what will happen in the future. And I'm sure she will say, "Oh no, no, I promise never to do that again." But we'll see whether the court believes her or believes or goes with the government's argument. So that may shorten her detention, or it may lengthen it, because the time that it takes for the court to make that decision will not be included in the time of her detention. So if the decision goes against her, it will actually lengthen her decision by some hours or days or something like that. Okay, according to what I'm reading in the media. So we'll see, and it'd be interesting also to um, make a note of how she may have changed during the past, what is it now, 6 days in jail, in her 72 square foot, about 6.7 square meter room. She has her own television, she has her own toilet, and she eats her meals by herself. Um, and the prison authorities are managing her movements so that she does not come into contact with other inmates. But it will be interesting to see how she has perhaps has changed, or perhaps she has not. Perhaps she's just as feisty as ever. I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. And I think it would be interesting to see that. But anyway, we'll see whether they have to, the lawyers have to decide whether or not to go ahead with this. And if they do, we'll see what happens in court. All right. So that is what that is going on there. And this is kind of important in Moldova. There was an election, and there was a pro-EU party and a pro-Russian party, and a pro-EU party won the election. That's interesting because Moldova is often seen as perhaps the next candidate for a Russian takeover if Ukraine goes, because Moldova is basically on the eastern side of, or I'm sorry, western side of Ukraine, and it would be one of the natural choices. I don't think they're a NATO member. That would be another reason why Russia may go after it if they want to keep moving west. Moldova's pro-Western governing party has decisively won a parliamentary election plagued by claims of Russian interference, and was widely seen as a definitive choice between staying in Europe's orbit or lurching into Moscow's. With nearly all polling stations reports counted on Monday, electoral data showed the pro-European Union Party of Action and Solidarity had 50.2% of the vote, while the pro-Russian Patriotic Electoral Bloc had 24.2%, according to the Associated Press. The Russia-friendly Alternativa Bloc came third, followed by the populist our party, etc., etc. Okay. And Zelensky says Russia has failed to destabilize Moldova, even after spending huge resources to undermine it and to corrupt whoever they could, Zelensky added. And Leading up to the vote, the Moldovan prime minister warned of Russian interference, saying Moscow is spending hundreds of millions of euros as part of an alleged hybrid war to try to seize power which he described as a final battle for our country's future. Russia has denied Moldova's claims. Geographically, Moldova is landlocked between Ukraine and EU member Romania. The country has in recent years moved westwards and attaining candidate status to the EU in 2022, just after Russia invaded Ukraine. And this associate professor of international relations at Oakland University told AP that PAS's victory is a clear win for pro-European forces in Moldova, which will be able to ensure continuity in the next few years in the pursuit of their ultimate goal of EU integration. A PAS majority saves the party from having to form a coalition that would have most likely been unstable and would have slowed down the pace of reforms to join the EU, he said, adding, Moldova will continue to be in the difficult geopolitical environment characterized by Russia's attempts to pull it back into its sphere of influence. But within Moldova, there is an area called Transnistria, right, which is kind of between the main part of Moldova and Ukraine. That is a heavily pro-Russian area, and I think Russia may continue to use that area to destabilize the country. We'll have to see what happens. Okay. All right. So anyway, congratulations to the people of Moldova for being able to. Well, I don't know which devil do you want, right? Which devil do you want? Oh my goodness. All right. Let's see. Yeah, this shooting at the Mormon church in Michigan is quite unfortunate. But again, was this a place where guns were allowed or not? I suspect that it was a no-gun zone, but let's see if they can tell us. Far below the piercing spires atop every Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint chapel is a small sign beckoning those who may want to come in. Visitors welcome messages are part of the uniform of meeting houses standardized by LDS Church's governing voice in Salt Lake City and serving as a testament to the faith's robust evangelical efforts. But on Sunday morning, one visitor took advantage of the church's open arms, ramming his truck into a chapel in Grand Blanc, Michigan, then setting it on fire and shooting at worshipers before dying in a shootout with police. At least 4 people were killed and 8 others wounded. More were still unaccounted for. So it was a shootout with police, not with the security of the church. At least 4 people were killed and 8 others wounded. More are still unaccounted for. The chapel of McCandish Road, a quiet stretch dotted with houses near a sprawling golf course and lake, is the latest place of worship devastated by America's unrelenting gun violence, from a Catholic church in Minneapolis to a synagogue in Pittsburgh to a Sikh temple in Wisconsin, all gun-free zones, all right, and all gun-free zones. Now in Michigan, the FBI is leading the investigation into the attack as an act of targeted violence. Sundays are supposed to be the time of peace and a time of reflection and worship. Timothy Jones, who belongs to LDS congregation 15 minutes away from Grand Blanc, told the Associated Press. But in the wake of violence at houses of worship, shooting feels inevitable, he said, and all the more tragic because of that. So, okay, well, get your security up then. Get your security up. What are you guys doing there with no security? Apparently. Okay. All right. So let's see what Breitbart says. 4 dead, 10 wounded. Building ablaze. And the perpetrator was shot dead by police. Arsonist ID'd as U.S. Marine veteran. And police were on scene in 25 seconds, but 25 seconds was long enough for 4 people to die, right? 4 dead in church attack, 2 of whom were shot. Ah, so 2 were not shot. Okay. Burned church. Ah, I see. They couldn't get out. Hmm. That's even worse. Let's see here. Rammed his vehicle through an exterior wall of the church while hundreds of churchgoers were inside. He then exited his vehicle and allegedly began shooting at churchgoers before he was ultimately killed by police. The attacker is believed to have used gasoline to set the church on fire, according to an ATF official. That's AWR Hawkins in that report. Okay, so two were shot. Two apparently may have been caught in the fire and couldn't get out, I guess, for some reason or another. Anyway, we'll have to follow this to see what's there. John Fetterman, the Democrat senator from Pennsylvania, shares a study of left-wing terrorism reaching 30-year high. Slammed Dems' extreme rhetoric, the Charlie Kirk effect, faith revival across the U.S. Yes, that's great, isn't it? And Dick Durbin becomes the first Democrat to criticize H-1B visa program. Um, and here, Trump will attend gathering of U.S. military officials ordered by Pete Hegseth. So this must have been a surprise by the defense secretary, although, sorry, not defense secretary, now the war secretary. President Donald Trump will attend defense secretary. See, even they are using defense secretary. I think it's now the War Department, so we should be saying war secretary instead of defense secretary. Large gathering of top U.S. military officials in Virginia this week. Who's going to be taking care of the bases and stuff, while these generals are meeting in Washington? I'm sure they'll be whining and dining there and enjoying the nightlife in Washington and in Northern Virginia. The president classified the meeting to NBC News as just a very nice meeting, talking about how well we're doing militarily, talking about being in great shape, talking about a lot of good, positive things. Okay, so they're not going to tell you the truth in a situation like this. Let's just go ahead and assume that, all right? So perhaps this was what Trump was told to say, but I can tell you, I don't believe this at all. We have some great people coming in. It's just an esprit de corps. You know the expression esprit de corps? We're talking about what we're doing, and they're doing, and how we're doing. What they're doing and how we're doing. Well, who's the they here? Right? Would that be the CCP by any chance? As Breitbart News reported last week, Hegseth ordered hundreds of U.S. military leaders, including generals and admirals, to gather on short notice this coming Tuesday at a U.S. Marine Corps base in Quantico, Virginia. According to the Washington Post, the directive included virtually all of the military's top commanders worldwide. Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell confirmed to the Post that Hegseth will be addressing his senior military leaders early next week. While offering no further details, he also expressed no concerns about the meeting. There are about 800 generals and admirals spread across the United States and dozens of other countries and time zones. Noted the Post Hegseth orders applies to all senior officers with the rank of brigadier general or above, or their Navy equivalent serving in command positions, and their top enlisted advisors. Top commanders in conflict zones and senior military leaders stationed throughout Europe, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific region are among those expected to attend Hegseth's meeting, said people familiar with this matter who spoke on condition of anonymity, as they were not authorized to publicly discuss the issue. Added. One source said military officials could not recall seeing such an order previously, sparking concern. People are very concerned. They have no idea what it means, one source told the Post. Well, if they're concerned, then probably we should be concerned as well. Both President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance have dismissed those concerns. They're not going to confirm them, are you? Yeah, you guys have a lot to be worried about. No, they're not going to say that. It's actually not unusual at all. Well, actually, it is. And I think it's odd that you guys have made it into such a big story, Vance told reporters. Well, it is a big deal. I mean, anytime you call in your whole team, basically it's like it's like a football game, and well, I wasn't sharing that, was I? It's basically like, and you call a timeout, right? Everybody come in here, right? We're gonna chart out the next play. That's basically probably what it is. We're gonna chart out the next play. All right. You go this way, you go that way, and you pass to this guy, and you fake to this person, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is probably what this is all about. Um, but the presence of President Trump is a interesting addition. If he thought it was nothing, he wouldn't be wasting his time attending. So that just, I think, increases people's concerns. And maybe Trump is curious. What's this guy going to tell people behind my back? All right, let's see. Former MI5 chief says war with Russia already here. Switzerland to introduce digital IDs after razor-thin referendum. Yeah, the UK is introducing digital ID, right? And remember, UK is where Animal Farm and what's the other one? Were written 1984. Uh, and actually, Diana sent me a story on that about how they're uh, selling this as a anti illegal immigration thing. But of course, they'll give it some sort of plausible explanation, but then later on, then they'll expand it. So let's take a look here at what the BBC is saying. The BBC, of course, is government supported, and so it's going to toe the government line. But let's see if we can see anything through this. Keir Starmer, that's the Prime Minister, confirms plans for a new digital ID scheme aimed at tackling illegal working. So yeah, so it's going to root out people who are working illegally in the UK. People will not be able to work without a digital ID, and the plans will make the country's borders more secure. But you know, um, there are some very smart people who have decided it is their life mission to do evil. Okay, I mean, they're very smart. They're very, very smart, and they just feel that it is their life mission to do evil. And so, of course, they're going to be creating fake digital IDs. Of course, they are. They're probably working on it already. So Starmer is acting as though this is an airtight system now. But well, it'll be fun to watch. Speaking from a conference in London, Starmer says progressive politicians have been squeamish about addressing illegal migration and things that are saying things that are clearly true. Wow. Okay, Labor Party. Do you have the number of the U.S. Democrats? My goodness. Yes. The Labor Party in UK, of course, is the leftist party, and some might even say Marxist. And so they're sort of in line. They're sort of, well, to the left, I would say, of the U.S. Democrat Party. Anyway, conservative leader calls the scheme a desperate gimmick. Well, the Lib Dems fear it would force people to turn over their private data. Well, yes, it will. It will indeed. Yes. And of course, it'll start out as something um, to block illegal work and stuff like that. But it'll expand. So the digital ID will start to include, okay, your credit information, your health information, your criminal background, if you have one, um, whether or not you qualify for government subsidy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There will be no end to it. There will be no end to it, especially in the UK. UK, is one of the, if not the most highly surveilled societies in the world. Some say even more than North Korea. So, I mean, the number of I saw a report once on the number of cameras on the UK streets, and it was astounding, actually. All right, so yes, thank you to my great grandfather for you for for hopping on a ship and leaving the UK. Yes, appreciate that. Hope you're satisfied. Told you so. I guess he's saying in this world. Okay. All right. Now, meanwhile, the Swiss now have decided that this is a good idea for some reason. Switzerland to introduce digital IDs after razor thin referendum. The Swiss, usually you think of people as having some brains in their head, but maybe not, huh? Digital identity cards are set to be introduced in Switzerland after voters narrowly approved a referendum on Sunday. Despite the majority of cantons voting against the EID legislation, a razor-thin majority of 50.39% of the Swiss public voted in favor of introducing digital identification. Voters had previously rejected a similar effort in 2021. However, after Swiss lawmakers backed the creation of a digital ID, signatures were quickly gathered to put the measure back before the people in a referendum on Sunday. It remains to be seen if this will be the final word on the matter, with opponents calling for another vote, giving the incredibly narrow result. Critics of the Federal Act on Electronic Identity have warned that the technology used is insufficient to protect citizen data from cyber attacks and hacks. And that's the thing. Yeah, I say that people are already working on this, all right? Cyber attacks and hacks. Opponents have also warned that digital IDs could be the beginning of an all-encompassing surveillance state, which could be used to punish government critics or dissidents. There was a story in the Korean media today about a family that was trying to get on an airplane, and so they had to go through, the Korean equivalent of the TSA checkpoint, and they couldn't because the data center, the government data center that stores their ID, right, caught fire. There was a fire there, and it was down, and so they couldn't they couldn't prove to the security staff there that they were who they said they were. And I don't know how that finally worked out, but they were having a hard time getting on the plane, according to this article. And so that can happen, and that happens when you have a centralized database like this. All right. So the answer would be, okay, well, then we will have a distributed database or distributed ledger, right? A blockchain. Well, we'll have a distributed ledger. Uh, I don't think that'll work very well in this kind of situation, kind of digital ID type of situation. Okay. All right, let's see. So the Swiss are going to do that, perhaps. Former MI5 chief says war with Russia already here. And Russia does keep sort of accidentally, on purpose, uh, invading or crossing into NATO territory, airspace, and that's causing growing concern, and that's how they sort of wear people down. Okay? UK assailed by cyber attacks and sabotage. Okay, war with Russia is already on Britain's doorstep, as evidenced by cyber attacks, sabotage, arson, and other hostile activities orchestrated by President Vladimir Putin, the former head of MI5 declared. Eliza Manningham Buller, who led the domestic spy agency 2 decades ago, says she agrees with analysts who caution Moscow was at war with the West as its communist allies show similar intent in inviting World War III. The Guardian reports Lady Manningham Buller argued the situation had changed since the invasion of Ukraine, and the various things I read about that the Russians have been doing here, sabotage, intelligence collection, attacking people, and so on. Speaking on a podcast in which she was interviewed by the Lord Speaker, John McFall, she then referenced Russia expert Fiona Hill, who advised President Donald Trump during his first term as US president and co-authored the UK Strategic Defense Review. She explained, I think she may be right in saying we're already at war with Russia. It's a different sort of war, but the hostility, the cyber attacks, the physical attacks, the intelligence work is extensive. The Guardian notes Pat McFadden, erstwhile Cabinet Office Minister, said last year Russia had stepped up its cyber attacks against the UK. Hackers have targeted a string of British businesses. Okay, well, let's try to have that photograph there. While the source of the attacks can take time to detect, many are suspected to originate in Russia. All that has been played out alongside Russian aggression in Ukraine. Wider elements of the UK defense infrastructure appear to be already operating on the assumption war with Russia will come sooner rather than later. As Breitbart London reported in June, Whitehall confirmed it will revive and update the Cold War era government war book, a detailed plan for dealing with an attack on the nation by a foreign power, Russia, in other words, for the first time in decades. Well, this is interesting when we read it in juxtaposition with the Hegseth meeting that's taking place tomorrow, right? So, what do you think? Do you think that's what it's about? They're going to talk about Russia. Do you think Hegseth is going to say, hey, you know what? We're already at war with Russia, you guys. A particular concern is, it is said, are Ukraine war-style strikes against Britain's critical national infrastructure, such as conventional missile strike against the nation's nuclear power plants. That's possible. Pollster YouGov previously revealed fresh research conducted as part of a series to measure the public mood on the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. Found large numbers of citizens in Western countries feel World War III is likely in the next 5 to 10 years. Tensions between Europe and Russia was seen as the biggest threat to peace, followed closely by Islamism. Yeah, we got a double whammy going on, don't we? Yes. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But or we'll see what's happening there. And of course, and China and Russia are also sort of coordinating, right? Coordinating. So is that Russia attacking NATO, distracting U.S. Towards Europe and towards perhaps the Middle East as well, and then China taking advantage of that, and the next month's meeting between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump taking place in South Korea. Xi Jinping will say, you know what, Donald, listen, you've got a lot on your hands. Maybe, you just take Taiwan off of your, take it, just put it aside. Just tell the world that you oppose independence by Taiwan. Taiwan is really hanging by a thread, and that thread is its relationship with Washington. So I don't think it would be a good idea for President Trump to do anything to weaken that relationship. I think if I were advising him, I would somehow advise him not to accept Xi Jinping's request. But the U.S. may issue some other language that might be a little bit closer to what Beijing wants eventually. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. I'm sure State Department is preparing something, and we'll see. They may come out strongly against it, say, hey, no way. Mm-hmm. And Trump appears prepared to strong-arm Netanyahu into Gaza deal. All right, we'll see if that happens. Mhm. Graham and Comey indictment. We'll see. Indictment, of course, is only the beginning of the process, and now they have to go to court and prove that he did wrong. All right. Here's his message. Okay, well, I'm looking at some headlines here. We can look at them together. Mhm. All right, let's go to Newsmax. Where's Newsmax? Don't have it. Okay. The current funding of the U.S. government ends tomorrow, the 30th of September, and they have to agree on something and get the president to sign it before midnight tomorrow. It's interesting. Usually they have this deadline on a Friday, so that gives them the weekend to sort of go into extra innings. But looks like this time they've done it on a weekday, so we could actually have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We could actually have the government really and truly shut down. All right, let's see here. And I think past shutdowns, I do not think they really did any damage. The only thing is, of course, the payment for enlisted military personnel. That's what that's the one thing that I'm concerned about, I think. Trump says FBI put 274 agents into the crowd on January 6th. Right, this will be, of course, January 6th, 2021. All right. What's a CBD? Oh my goodness. This is marijuana. Cannabidiol could revolutionize senior health care by helping reduce disease progression and was shown as an alternative to prescription drugs. There you go. The whole senior population. Is it, does this produce a high? Like, I don't know. Anyway. Okay. Hey, there you go. Pastor Miles, church leaders must bolster security. Excellent point. Excellent point. Excellent point. Pastor Lucas Miles, Senior Director of Turning Point USA Faith and author of Pagan Threat Confronting America's Godless Uprising, told Newsmax that Sunday's deadly attack at a Mormon church in Michigan underscores the need for houses of worship, excuse me, to bolster security, warning that Christians worldwide are facing rising persecution. First off, the right to worship freely is one of the most sacred of our rights, and it is God given. Um, and also, Newsmax's Sunday agenda after reports that a gunman opened fire and set fire to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints in Grand Blanc, killing one and injuring at least 9 others. So now we know that it's actually 4 killed and 10 injured. Anytime you see an attack, regardless of what faith it is, on a house of worship, that's a tragic thing, and our hearts and prayers are with them. Okay. All right. So, yes, good to see someone talking about the need for increased security. And see here. Okay. Russia unleashes massive missile attack on Ukraine's Kiev. Russia unleashed a barrage of drones and missiles on Ukraine overnight into Sunday, killing at least 4 people, with the capital city of Kiev suffering the heaviest assault. This is the first major bombardment since an air attack on Kiev left at least 21 dead, last last month. So, President Trump looks at this and he says, okay, well, Putin has gone crazy. That's what he says, or, he's not only that he's disappointed, but um, it's got to stop. It's got to stop. And then the U.S. pushes weapons boost for China conflict risk, urging defense contractors to double or quadruple production rates, focusing on 12 critical weapons due to concerns over low U.S. stockpiles and a potential conflict with China. The Wall Street Journal reported Monday, citing people familiar with the matter. Reuters could not immediately verify the report. The Pentagon did not immediately respond to a Reuters request for comment. President Trump and Secretary Hegseth are exploring extraordinary avenues to expand our military might and accelerate the production of munitions, Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell told the Journal. This effort has been a collaboration between defense industry leaders and senior Pentagon officials. Alarmed by dwindling missile inventories, and they give them all to Ukraine, right? The Pentagon wants major war contractors to dramatically accelerate production amid fears the U.S. could be underprepared for a future confrontation with China. Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll said the War Department is planning massively substantive changes to how we buy our stuff. Yeah, well, I was hoping that after the recent holy days, that sort of the move towards a war would lessen, but it does not seem to be the case. As Hak Chahan is going through her judgment, looks like the world at large as well, maybe about to go through a certain degree of judgment. Okay. And so, not surprising then to hear then that gold breaks $3,800 barrier on rate cut bets, it says, but that's not all. It's also on the increasing feeling that we're about to enter a time of war. It went up to 3815.49 per ounce by 10:52 GMT after hitting 3819.59 earlier in the session. And gold futures for December delivery rose 1% to 38.45. So this would be the spot. And this is the spot. These are spot prices here. Okay. 10:52. That would be what in 6:52, I guess, Eastern time. So about an hour ago ish, an hour or so ago. So when gold goes up, they're saying, rate cut, but I think that's not correct. That's part of it, of course, but I think a bigger factor is the growing feeling among people who manage money, that there may be a major war about to break out, or two, or three. Yes, we could really get into a terrible situation worldwide. Medvedev warns Europe of nuclear danger with war with Russia. Of course, Medvedev is a hawk. He's sort of the mouth, basically. Europe could not afford a war against Russia, but that if its leaders made the mistake of triggering one, it could escalate into a conflict with weapons of mass destruction. Well, that's enough. I hope I didn't depress you too much, but we need to be prepared, right? And it looks like a lot of people are preparing by buying gold. That's what it looks like to me. That's why the price is going up. That's a large part of it, much more than the rate hike, I think. Well, the rate cut. I'm sorry, the rate cut, which we're expecting this week, I guess, is it? I think it's this week, maybe. Right. All right. So that's all I have for today. Let's pray that God's will be done. God bless Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly.